Good, Alan. Good to see you here, sir. I wonder if we could make a start, please. In fact, well, firstly, probably to follow a good process, can I just firstly ask, as we move into the, do you have any apologies? So Tim is not here. Normally would be. Is he going to join us by Zoom? He maybe. We won't take an apology at this stage. We'll see where we stand on that. In relationship to that, though, I do want to ask, just for a matter I want to raise under the agenda. Are people under time pressure today? We've got quite a full agenda.
Always.
Always, Alan. I appreciate that. Okay, we'll come back to that. There are no apologies at this stage. We will move on. I have no indication at this stage of any public forum. And then I'd like to move to changes to the public agenda. To the agenda. We have currently under the public excluded agenda the receipt of the independent review of arrangements around electronic access, and I would, from the chair, wish to. Sorry, Claire.
We need to receive it as a major late item.
Oh, sorry. That's a good point. Let me. We have the report, and I'd like to propose that rather than hear it in public excluded, that we actually receive it and debate it in public. In other words, that we do two things. We receive it as a late item because obviously it was only finalised and sent to you on Monday, number one. And number two, that we receive and debate and deal with the report actually in public. So I will move from the chair that we deal with that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Nobby. Is there any discussion on the motion? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. I'd also just like to acknowledge that over the weekend, Nobby sent me, g'day Alex, Nobby sent me an email from one of our ratepayers, Mr. Tribe, who did actually look at that item as we had it listed on public excluded, and on my good advice, on advice to me, I quite agree that we had tried to use the wrong or incorrect section to have it in public excluded. So Nobby, thank you for forwarding that, and thank you to Mr. Tribe that he actually pointed out a mistake in our administration. And but the fact that we had moved this to public actually removes the issue that he raised. So I think Claire is going to respond to Mr. Tribe formally, just to indicate that we acknowledge his comment. Right. That being the case, I wonder if I could then move, please, to declarations of interest. Do we have any matter here that needs to be on the agenda that you need to raise any matters of interest over? Being none, I would like to then move to, sorry, I need to check here, Claire.
Sure.
The public excluded, do we deal with that now in terms of where it sits in the agenda? I always struggle with this one.
No,
we'll do it later. Thank you. That's good. It's just where it sits in the agenda. Thank you. Can we move, please, to item 4, which is the minutes, and we have two sets of minutes here. We have both the ordinary meeting we had on the 24th of August, and we also have the emergency meeting, which we received the 6-month review update by Mr. Thompson on the 6th of September. I would move from the chair that we accept those as a true and correct record. Is there any matters of correction or update that people need to raise with these matters? There being none, I'll put the motion.
I'll second that.
And thank you, Rangi. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. We could then please move to item 5. Oh, sorry, I realised again, thinking about this move to public forum of the report on that we're receiving. I propose to have it at the end of the agenda. We will go through the established agenda, which public agenda, which will include the verbal update from Michael. Then we will deal at this stage with the report that we've moved into public. Right, now that I've got myself hopefully discombobulated or in the right way, I'd like to move, we've dealt with item 5 as well. Can we, no we haven't, yes we have, can we please move to item 6, which is working together update. And I think we've got Jane on board. Thank you, Jane. Good morning. Very keen to hear from you.
Morning, everybody. Would you like me to just speak to this briefly, Bruce?
Yes, please, Jane. That would be very helpful.
Yeah. Look, just a few things to note. The working together reporting has got a bit out of sync, partly because of COVID, partly because of the late delivery of the 6-month review. So in effect, this report is rather outdated and more for the record than anything else. The things I'd like to note is that work is already underway in implementing and what the next steps should be in terms of the Thompson report. I think that's noted in this report. In fact, the governance group meets on next Wednesday. The agenda will be out on Friday, and that contains a plan to implement the suggested next steps. I would like to note a couple of things about this report. Recommendation 4, the risk register is way out of date, and in fact you'll see a different picture when the governance group reports back to the next council meeting. And the second thing to note is the budget, because I know that Risk and Assurance are always interested in the budget. We are well within budget, but we will probably, I'd suggest, take the opportunity to recast what goes where along with the new suggested plan going forward. So I think that's all I'd like to say, Bruce, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate it. Do we have any questions for Jane or any comments about the report that people like to make? I think you've probably summed it up, Jane, that actually it's come in a timing cycle where actually the next report will be a substantial upgrade on the basis of the report. So I appreciate that. Yes, Rangi.
Just looking at the nice coloured charts thing. Item 6, which is the lack of willingness by council to take action-based, one word, on advice from this project. Now, it's got the impact as being medium. I think the impact of this is actually critical. It's quite high. That if the willingness is not there, then it's gone. It's a non-event. And we've seen a couple of recent examples where that willingness is not there. So I just want to comment on that. Where does that sit? Have we got the right weighting on that?
Well, firstly, the impact is medium, but at the moment the post mitigation likelihood is high, Rangi. So we are on this risk one identifying that as a significant issue. Claire, sorry, Jane, I'm conscious that you've said that the report will look quite different. I don't want to anticipate your report, but I wonder whether you might have a comment on this one at this time, please.
Yes, the report, this risk register looks quite different, and I'm quickly trying to go to what it looks like now, but from memory, we're just down to about 2 risks that we need to worry about. If I can just get into this bit here, I can tell you what it looks like now. Bear with me. Sorry, Councillor.
Jane, if it's too hard, I'm very happy that we take on advice that you think it's changing.
It's probably a waste of the committee's time for me to look up and tell you exactly what it's looking like now, because you may want to debate it, but it has changed from what we've got now.
For the better or for the worse?
Oh, it wouldn't be for the worse, because we've generally got a good report, so it'll be...
Jane's report.
That's right. That's right. That's comforting to know. That's always going to be a matter, I suspect, Rangi, that's going to be on the list while we are undergoing the working together program. So I appreciate that you've actually raised it, and that we need to keep our eye on it, because it goes to the foundation of what we are trying to achieve here, in which I think we can acknowledge that the 6-month review said that on the whole we are heading in the right direction, if not actually having achieved a lot. Thank you for that, Rangi. Is there any other questions people like to raise? Yes, Darryl.
Can
Darren.
I just make a point that I hear what Rangi's saying, but if we look at the word counselling and distinguish it from counsellors, council has taken action. So from that perspective,
Yeah.
I think the report is accurate.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
I thought council is councillors in the definition.
Let's not get too worried about that, guys. Can I be honest?
We'll look into
there
it
is a
in
very
the
interesting semantic point here, and I actually think they're both quite good points to make. So I'd like to suggest we move on.
I wanted to raise a few points regarding the Ken Patterson report and the Buchanan report. So it doesn't come up till the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Sir Tim. Prior to your coming, we have passed the motion that in the public section of the agenda we will deal with the report onto access, and that will be done as item, I think it's effectively item 13 now on the public agenda. Right, can we move to the recommendations, please, on Jane's report, working together update. Is somebody prepared to move those for me, please? Yes, thank you, Rangi. Thank you, Bex. Is there any discussion on the motion? Or motions, I should say. Being none, I'll put them. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. If we could then move to item 6, which is the interim internal audit program update. Peter, I suspect we need to find a place for you. I can see at the back there you've got a microphone. That's good. I'll pass it over to you, please.
Morning, Mr. Chair, councillors, your worship. I'll take the report as being read and just like to note that there's been additional 7 actions completed since the August report. So we're trending down with the remaining actions outstanding, which is positive. Deloitte are also conducting 2 reviews at the moment for sensitive expenditure and payroll. We expect those reports in October, which will be reported to the December committee meeting. Mr. Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
If there's any questions.
Yes, are there any questions for Peter at this stage? Just have a couple, Peter. Sorry, mate. And firstly, appreciate the closure of items. I guess the critical thing I'd like to know is actually, have we got any really significant recommendations that are outstanding? Probably as an accountant, I went straight to the cash handling and petty cash, for which we've closed 5. But if the 15 that are open are big issues, we've got a bigger problem. So I'm just trying to understand if you give us a sense of where that's at.
The main ones outstanding are in accounts payable, but with the introduction of the procurement framework and policy, this will actually clear up a number of those accounts payable, especially the 12 high risk items.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Ross, I think you had a question, did you?
It was more about the broader picture of the whole internal audit program, and that the time frame for completion, and then I presume a rolling check of particular items. And also, are we using internal resource as well, or are we relying solely on Deloitte?
Peter, perhaps you could explain to me, or explain to the group, the program and actually the arrangements you've got for internal audit as it stands, please.
We have an engagement for 3 years with Deloitte to work through the internal audit program. I'm waiting for an update from them on the following 2 years of their program. We also have an internal auditor that does Building Control Authority and environmental health audits on our behalf. for accreditation purposes, as well as additional audits, i.e. for animal care facility or any other audits that are arisen.
Have with that?
Yeah,
Ross?
just
Yeah,
pop
no,
back.
it's good. That's good. Yeah, yeah. And look, perhaps just to reflect, and I'm trying to think whether we have occasionally, annually, we should actually see indeed what is the internal audit program plan, whether it's both internal or external. So Peter, perhaps if you later might want to just remind us when we might see that. I think, Ross, that's probably, if I can read into your question, a valuable point for us to be aware of. I'm sure we've seen it, so no worries. Any other questions for Peter? There being none, I'd like to look at the move to the recommendations, which is that we note the interim report from Peter, and also that certain actions have been completed, which is great. Do I have a mover for that motion, please? Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Darren. I'll put the motion then, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate the time. Project Management Office status update. Here's a good favourite one for a risk committee at this, well, actually probably this year, actually, of all things. So, Lee, I think we met you last time by, am I correct?
Online.
By way of video, so welcome physically, and Tess, good to see you here as well. Thank you. We're in your hands.
Morning all. Just like to run through the report. Obviously, I'll take it that it's been read, and I'll just pop through the program, project by project, if that's okay. Anderson House, we're progressing with that well. We're just in the contract phase of that, so that's on track, and we're quite comfortable where we are with that one. The Healthy House program is running well, in the sense that by the time of the next risk and audit, I think we should be complete. So that's gone well. And the revisiting or reimagining phase of the museum is also tracking quite well. We've appointed all our consultants for that, and we're into workshops with the different groups. So that's also tracking very well. The office refurbishment, I've actually taken a bit of time just to have a look at that and sort of do a bit of discovery myself on that one. And I've sort of tweaked the procurement plan for that. So we've sort of rephased that a little bit. So it's slowed down a couple of weeks, and that's just to give myself some time just to get up to speed with it. So we've reforecast that one slightly. The city centre streets, you would have seen, we're now boots on the ground, which is excellent, and when construction's underway. I'm sure there'll be some questions on that a bit later. The Three Waters renewals, that's a bit of an ongoing program of work, which is tracking not too bad. The Branksome water main is probably one of the ones we've got a bit of an issue with, and we're working through that at the moment, and I'm sure there'll be some questions on that a bit later. Design, we're really pushing on with design to remove a lot of risk here on that particular project. The stock bank, again, tracking reasonably well, and we're still looking at construction, hopefully starting in November. That sort of concludes the water tower. Obviously is closed, so we won't go into that too much.
Thank you for that, Lee. Tess, you're here. Is there anything you need to add to this in terms of sort of systems, process, or risks?
No, everything is going well. Lee and I have handed over from me to him, so I'm just tidying up a couple of loose ends with Lee, and thought if there's any questions that you guys have today that you Lee needed some support with, then
Thanks.
help out.
Thanks, Tess. Councillor Goodis-Modis, I suspect, Rangi, through your committee, that you do deal directly with these issues. What I'm wanting to reflect here, our role is to make certain systems and processes and the overall control is in place. So I'm not wanting to relitigate necessarily individual projects unless there are matters that should be of a risk and assurance nature that we should have. So it's a very good report, but I'm very keen to know that we keep ourselves at that higher level of this, because Rangi, I presume you've done this on a line-by-line basis, correct, at your committee?
Pipe by pipe.
Pipe by pipe. Okay, so that's good. So I just remind that we're here to deal particularly with broader issues. So I'm keen that we keep it at that level. Are there questions for Lee or Tess at this stage, guys? Have I killed it because I said? Oh, sorry about that. That's made it a bit quicker. Can I just, sorry, at the risk then that I have killed it. Can I just ask a couple of questions, please, Lee and Tess, if that's okay?
Absolutely.
And I'm just interested in the Three Waters renewal. In terms of a committee, risk committee, we often relate dollars to the total forecast for the year, the budget, because that's the big strategic issue that we all face. And when looking at the diagram, I was trying to work out actually what are the milestones. What gives me the comfort that the renewal program is on track and going well? Because when I looked at the diagram, it was just it's construction. But I wonder if we have a sense as to whether that renewal program, which is of equal importance to all the vertical builds we have, are we on track? Is this in the right place?
I think for a tracking mechanism, I think you're right in the sense of costs. Cost forecasted and cost spent and committed is probably a very high level way of pulse checking to see where that's at. If that's helpful in answering that.
Yeah, at this moment you're comfortable with the renewal program, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. And look, there are two reds there and I'm looking here at page 28 of 77. There are two reds there. I think you said you're comfortable. In a sense, we have a plan to address those two reds?
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, that's good. Are there any other questions folk would like to raise? Right, if we move then please to, actually no, sorry, there was one other one, sorry. If you looked at, I was interested in the Three Waters, which is relevant given we've got demands in relationship to central government funding, and the dependencies were in red, which says we're tracking but reliance on contractors to perform. What is the market like for this then?
Yeah, look, we're tracking that one as red because we are on a shared panel with Southern District Council, and it is just a question of being able to manage those resources across both councils. So it's absolutely on the list for us as a critical item. If we don't have the resources, we can't deliver the program. So that's why we're still showing it as red. We are doing a lot of program work with both councils are working together, and hopefully in the next reporting period that will de-escalate.
Yes, Erin.
I just wanted to make a comment just around that resourcing on the panel. It's an interesting one because we're quite constantly going back to the panel and asking them, are they comfortable that they have the resources to meet the program? To this stage, we're constantly getting a yes, we do. But again, we're just taking a little bit of that conservative approach to that one because we are concerned that they may be over-promising. So we need to keep a really tight eye on that one.
I'm encouraged by the, and have to declare my interest obviously, but I'm encouraged by the connection with Southern District because I presume in that way, essentially we don't get ourselves into a bidding war with Southern District, which makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
And yet hopefully the total contractor market also benefits from the approach.
Exactly right.
I'm thrilled by that, that makes sense. Okay, if there's no other questions, given I've done all the questioning, I should probably move from the chair that we've received the Project Management Office status report. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Tess. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Rangi. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, I'll put the motion, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Brilliant. Thank you. Move to item 9. Really important and very interesting. Policy development, our procurement policy, and I'd appreciate it. Take it, Nick. You're going to lead off. Or was it Brennan?
Thank you, Chair, Morena, councillors. So this report is bringing back the procurement policy now that it has been workshopped by councillors and internal manager discussions for adoption for engagement. I will just note that the date on the report is wrong, so apologies for that. It is the correct report. Somehow that managed to slip through the net. So probably I'll just touch briefly, I'll take the report as read, but I'll touch briefly on the engagement plan. So the proposal is really to focus on two main groups. The first one is the supplier market themselves. So we've done some work reaching out already to suppliers, and we will run a webinar for them, a Q&A session with Nick and with the procurement team so that they can ask any questions and we can elevate any potential issues that may be around the implementation of the policy. And then secondly, we will make the policy available to the wider public, which we anticipate the interest there may be more around the social procurement options that the policy allows for. And so we will gather feedback from those two groups and then bring a report back to this committee.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Appreciate that. I think I certainly compliment you on the voluntary consultation process that you're going through, which is superb. Do we have questions or points that the committee would like to make with Rhiannon on that, please, at this stage? Yes, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, we had a really comprehensive workshop around this, and talked about options before where we had gone through a procurement process that our previous framework didn't really allow for. So I'm really happy to see the inclusion of quite a few parameters that we didn't have before, including the social and really defining what it means to be economical and cultural, also the environmental weighting in our procurement process. So I would be more than happy to approve and endorse all three recommendations, and also noting that we're going out for voluntary consultation on this, or engagement, sorry, not consultation. And that is excellent for the local community to be able to engage with us in that manner, especially when they're going to be pitching for those themselves.
Thanks, Alex. Well, I take it effectively you're saying you're going to move the motion. If that's the case, would I have a seconder? Thank you, Bex. Is there any other more comments either on the motion or indeed on the paper that people like to raise? I have a couple actually, if that's okay. Got to get my questions in. Look, it's important, and I'd want to perhaps just remind councillors of this, that under B, in we are asserting that we will be ethical and fair in our treatment of the market, and I think we are saying that we will hold ourselves to a high standard. And it's important, I think, to remember that as we enter into the procurement processes, that we will have basically everything that we do. So I happen to note that. But look, just a couple of questions. Rhiannon, when I looked at 3, governance and approvals, and I don't want to sort of be too all over the place, just remind me about supplier panels. They come in over $100,000. They don't operate at a lower level. I thought that supplier panels might have actually operated for a lower level of contract.
With the 100,000, what we're basically saying is you do have to use panels or go out to the market. Under 100,000, you can get you can process more towards 3 quotes or single quote, which can involve a panel, or it may not involve a panel, but it's more open.
Sweet, got that. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. So it's more optional. Get it. And for over, and the only thing I also noticed then was on the next page was with probity advice and a probity auditor. It would be for it would be optional. I think I've got, yes, maybe appointed for, and it would be projects over 5 million and not necessarily ones under. Or do we still reserve the right if there was something sensitive under 5 million that we might have a probity audit? Would that be right?
That's correct.
Correct. Good. Okay, that's great. That's what I'd be keen to know. And a minor point under the stages, 1.1. This is on page. Wait a sec. I can find it on my thing. 41 to 77. I think I note the important the identify council and community needs. You're actually starting to identify some of the design principles and planning principles you'll bring into your projects. So diversity, disability, business, blah blah blah, and you've got reducing carbon footprint. I wondered whether there was also a case for addressing climate change in the sense of the effects that it may have on our facilities, and that we would allow for those, not just the good merit of reducing our carbon footprint, but actually also the effects of climate change. Who knows, might be more regular flooding, blah blah blah, and does that affect floor heights and all that sort of drama? that would be my questions, Nobby. I think have you got points?
Yeah, just one for Nick. When we had the workshop, I noticed there was a provision in the paper that was initially presented that doesn't seem to be here. So if you can help me, if I've lost it. There was a provision on page 37 where it talked about the different levels of criteria against how much the contracts are worth. And there was one there in fine print that said temporary contracts could be extended where there was no increase to the value of the contract without going to the marketplace. Now that seems to have been lost in this. And I use that because we've recently used that to extend the recycling contract with SDE under that principle. So has it been moved somewhere else, or have I missed it? So the provision basically said if we had a temporary contract in place and wished to extend it, and it didn't involve an increase in the financial cost of that contract, it could go to a GMO, a group manager, for approval without going to the marketplace, and there was no value against that. So that seems to have gone.
I need to go back to the notes, but the general intent is when contracts come up for renewal, they will be put out to the open market. Some will be extended if we don't have the resources to go immediately out to the market. And with the larger value ones, they will come through the council. So I'd need to probably double check the comment you made.
I'd like to hear back on that because we've recently extended a contract, as you'll be aware, a significant contract with a significant value. And the period that we extended to is also significant. And that was done under that provision. That provision's now gone. And so I'd like to think that was just an oversight and that hasn't been removed because that boxes in some of the contracts we've got.
Okay, look, Nobby, I think we've got the benefit this comes back to us.
Sure.
Okay,
yeah, thank you.
I'm very grateful that you've raised it, but I think if we just recognise, we'll give Ren and Nick time to, as they go through the consultation process, to pick up on if and how that may or may not be addressed. Alex, did you have another point, please?
It was more just on that line of thinking, and it may be a silly question, but if we have this policy and a situation arises where that could be extraordinary, like perhaps to what Councillor Clark is referencing, if we adopt this policy, does it preclude us from making a decision that is outside of the scope of the policy, provided we have a different lay of the land and a different circumstance, perhaps it's extraordinary or emergency?
The policy does have a clause or a section which allows the CEO or a GM with the relevant delegations to operate outside the policy. What the aim of the policy is, as we state it, is to probably cover 95% of the transactions. There will always be exceptions, and that's why we put that specific clause in the policy.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, sorry, Buckle.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. Just wanted to add into there, and it does respond back to both questions that have been asked. The delegation in relation to renewal and extensions is part of our Appendix 2, which refers to delegation. It must be within delegation in relation to that, so it can go through your GM process. But of course, if it needs delegation above that from an extension of contract, then it needs to go through the council channel as well from that perspective. So it is possible from that perspective with those extensions, and it is same from those exceptions, etc. as well. Thanks
for that. Michael, yes, Nobby.
Just as an addition to what Alex has just said and what Nick responded to, it raises some concerns with me that we have a set of policy going out for public consultation, which gives the community some sort of parameters on how we will deal with our procurement, which is big dollars. And so we have a lot of purchasing power in the community, but then we have potentially a 5% provision that we might be able to scoot around it a little bit, that we have some other criteria in the back room, as it were, that says that we can actually put this to a side. Now, we've all been around long enough to know what happened with the recycling tender last time. It was an absolute mess for us. And I don't want somebody to come back and bite me in the rear end by saying, well, you know, you've got this policy here, you publicly consult on it, but then you've got a very large contract that goes around that. So I just need to have some certainty around that. And so it'd be helpful to have that come back.
Thank you. And Nobby, I would remind, that's why I actually pointed out right at the start, my first comment was we are committing ourselves in writing here to ethical and fair treatment.
Sure.
So, you know, I think you use 95% as a just a number.
Yeah, understand that.
I wouldn't want to suggest that all of a sudden we're just going to, through this willy-nilly, allow 5%. The reality of it is the principle is that we are fair and ethical, and that is to the market. So that would have to be a primary principle that any decision maker within council would take on board with them as they dealt with this policy. So look, good point. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Nobby. Nick, that's and Rhiannon, that's a key part to think through as part of what's consulted on. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments for Nick or Rhiannon at this stage? That being the case, there are none. I have Alex moving and Beck seconding, and it's to deal with all three, which is that we note the engagement plan, and that we essentially are adopting the draft procurement policy for that engagement process. And I think it's fair to say that you've heard the comments from us about the various parts which you may want to consider as you finalise that consultation. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work on that, Nick and Rhiannon. This is it's a highly important area for the sector as a whole at the moment. I think we're moving then to the long-term plan review. I suggest, Rhiannon, you're probably staying there, I suspect. If you could take us through your paper, please. I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this report deals with the review of the long-term plan. So outlines how that review was undertaken, key findings of the review, and then some of the learnings that will be taken forward in terms of the delivery and preparation for the delivery of the 2024 to 2034 long-term plan. So I won't go into the report in too much detail, but just to note that it was really good to see the engagement of the councillors and various members of the staff who were involved in the process, and that a wide level of feedback will help to inform and deliver a successful long-term plan next time around. I think broadly the feelings about this long-term plan was that it was a process that was well delivered under difficult circumstances, that the engagement with the process was high, and that we ended up with a fairly strong result in terms of the plan that came out at the other end. There are of course some areas where we will definitely be able to improve for next time. Going into the long-term plan right at the beginning of the process, it was determined at that time that we would take an iterative approach to the long-term plan improvement, given the scale of what was needed to be done when we started in February last year. So some of that will continue, and that is in that diagram, which I'm not sure what page it's on. I think it's on page 47, which shows some of those elements of improvement that will be built into the cycle for the next time around. So some of that is around asset condition data, the work of the climate change working group, which has commenced and will soon be bringing a report to council. Issues around improving the performance framework, some of the customer research, etc., elements of that type. The only other thing that I will mention is that some of this report covers a document produced by Simon Markham, who is a strategy manager of many years' experience at another council, who reviewed the process for determining investment in strategic projects, and that was as part of the governance work stream. So that report is provided here for completeness, but just as Jane mentioned earlier, that work stream was delayed by COVID, and so the working group actually only discussed that report with Simon yesterday. So there may be something that members of that working group want to say at this point about that report.
Lindsay, that's your group, is that right?
Yes, Chair. We did meet yesterday for the first time in a long time, and had the opportunity to hear from Simon on Zoom about his report and its recommendations. The upshot of all of that is that we agreed at the working group yesterday that the framework itself would be the product of the work that Rhiannon has done and is progressing through risk and assurance, and the offering from the working group would be a suite of guidance notes to support that framework. And my task, as a consequence of the decisions yesterday, is to recast one of the papers that they considered in a form that can be signed off by the working group, which we may potentially do electronically, and then come through to PGG and the council, and that will complete the working group's task and bring together the offering, I suppose, Rhiannon's work plus the contribution that the working group's made. And we should be able to sign that all off by the end of November, depending on meeting sequence.
Thank you. That's good. Right, thank you for that, Lindsay. Thank you, Rhiannon. Are there questions, points that members would like to make at this stage, please? There are none. Oh, gee whiz, we're getting my questions in. Sorry, Rhiannon. Can we just stop for a tick? Can we all go to page, what is it? It's the first page, 45 to 77. Now, how do we celebrate around this place? How do we? Guys, we're gonna say well done. Can we say well done to Rhiannon? She's going to present at the Taituara conference in, is it November? Now let's remember, Taituara or Sorghum is based around promoting good practice, best practice. And the fact is they have asked Invercargill to present. Isn't that good? So the work that you are doing is being shared elsewhere around the country. You're going to celebrate that? Don't know how, but I suggest that you do. And in fact, I'd love it to be noted in the minutes that actually we congratulate Rhiannon in particular, and the fact that this will be shown for all its good strengths and debated at Taituara in, as I think it is, November. So in your Southern Reserve, can I suggest that you are happy, you smile, and you say, well done, Rhiannon, right at the stage. Thanks, Patricia. As a good Christchurch person, she knows. Okay, so well done. Thank you, Rhiannon. Appreciate that. Well done.
I do think it's well done to everyone.
Yep. Well, good for being humble too, but thank you, Rhiannon. I think that's really, really good. Now I got my questions, so well done. Can I just say, well done on the diagram. I think that's probably because I read diagrams better than I read words. I actually found this really helpful, and I take on board your point about the need for planning to be continuous. And actually, I just want to reflect an important point here. I don't know why October 2022 is in green on your diagram, other than, of course, it's the next local body elections. And this reflects the importance of us capturing, indeed, the work that you have done now with people like Simon, Lindsay, your strategic working party, because we need to build on our corporate understanding and knowledge as we go forward. So that leads me then to probably really my only question, Rhiannon, and that is, if I understand it correctly, I'm looking at page 52 of 77, there is a preparation of an improvement plan. I take it that that's what that diagram is effectively showing. I guess I'm really asking the question, should we include that in our resolution? Because I don't see it recognised there, and I think it's important that we recognise that we endorse the preparation and adherence to a improvement plan. I'm open to your suggestions on that, and I don't have to. We don't have to if we don't want to, but I'm just interested in your views.
I certainly have no problem with that. I just want to clarify, you're talking about the diagram because it's page 47 on mine.
Yes.
Is it that one that you're talking about? Yes, I'm more than happy for a recommendation noting that there is an improvement plan in place.
Good. Look, that's fine. I would like to that we note that. I really should be talking to my members that we note that in under 4. Because I think it's important that we recognise we have a plan which we should monitor developments against in future meetings, which is really superb. Okay, any other questions people like to raise? No? Can we then just move to the recommendations, please? And they are fulsome, as you might expect with such a good point. We note the key findings, we note the report into the prioritisation of strategic projects, as part of the long-term plan received from Simon Markham, and we endorse the recommendations that underpin the plan, which is we recognise continuous planning, we refine the strategic project decision-making framework. That was a very interesting framework, well done. We utilise the decision-making framework within strategic decision-making process, supporting ongoing alignment with the long-term plan. So I think that was a really good point you made, that actually it's not just the long-term plan this all relates for, it's actually for our decision-making full stop. We recognise the projects are stronger when business cases are developed. And I would like to suggest, that we acknowledge there is an improvement plan in place, which will be monitored. That may seem a wee bit weak, but I'd just like to get it in fact that we need to monitor that there's an improvement plan. I'm glad to see your typing's as good as mine, thank you. From time to time. From time to time. So do you want to put that in? Well, we're monitored from time to time by this committee. By this committee, yes.
From time
yes.
to time.
Thank you. That makes it better, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We note that the LTP project team will continue, which is great, and actually appreciate the second part of that, which is an opportunity for the councillors to continue to guide the process, and we note the issues identified as key focus area for the next long-term plan. Isn't it crazy? We're already talking about that.
Sorry, excuse me, Chair. I think you're just missing the word plan from that resolution.
Number E.
Oh, the improvement plan. Sorry, thank you very much. Look, given I'm going to suggest that we take that as a as without, dare I say it, through formal amendment, I will, from the chair, put the motion that we move and these motions. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Darren. Is there any discussion on the motions? There being none, I'll put them all 1 to 6, including the new E, as I think we've now got up on the board. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Right, can we move, please, then, look at that, 2022-23 annual plan delivery. We're into thinking annual plans already. And that's tremendous. Rhiannon, again, you're still there. Thank you. You're in the hot seat.
Thank you again, Chair. So the annual plan delivery, this report is really to provide the Risk and Assurance Committee with an overview of where things are at in preparation for the annual plan. The approach from a financial perspective will be that we are using year 2 as the base budget. This is not a total reforecast. There are a number of projects where, of course, timelines and budgets are shifting slightly. So the ELT has been fully briefed on those, especially those within the capital space that may have a larger impact. At this point in time, we are thinking it is likely we will need to consult on this annual plan, probably as a result of the work coming out of the museum reimagining initiative, which is likely to result in a significant change to that project particularly. There will be an opportunity then at that time for the public to feedback on any other elements of the annual plan that they wish Council to consider. So the timeframe that's outlined in this report is based on if consultation does take place. If for some reason it is not required, then we will try to deliver the annual plan a little earlier. And that's probably all I will say at this point, other than to note, obviously for this committee I have outlined the 3 main risks. So perhaps I will actually go through those since they are significant. We obviously are awaiting to see what the government will do around changing legislation around 3 waters and the Local Government Act. At this point, under the current legislation, we are required to undertake an LTP amendment in order to deliver a 3 waters opt-in or opt-out decision. So that will need to be carefully managed if the government doesn't change legislation, which they have indicated they will. COVID obviously may impact on the financial reforecasting. That's probably likely to be more significant for the financial side. We do have a plan in place which is also included in this. That will be an update of the LTP consultation approach to deliver under COVID, so we can continue. And obviously we're just all aware of the limitations at the moment in terms of the number of auditors, and just that might be flow-on impacts into the annual plan process from other processes.
Thank you for that, Rhiannon. That's a very interesting summation. Can I just open it up for members of the questions you'd like to ask Rhiannon? Yeah, your head goes down. You started to think about the next annual plan, but actually this is really important that we nail this now, because it's setting the framework a wee bit for going forward. Any questions for Rhiannon? None? Sorry. Oh, Ross wants to? Oh, sorry.
Well, I think we just need to recognise that the risks are out of our control.
Yeah.
So as long as we have the resource available to adapt as soon as we need to, then it does put some pressure on. So we just need to, we just need to recognise that.
Sitting on the shelf waiting.
That's right. That's right.
So the available resource may be the fourth risk.
Or the need for additional resource in light of the other three.
Yeah, yeah. The downstream impact could
Yeah.
be that it will place us under pressure, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay. So look, we could just, I think we do need to note that as a group that it isn't always plain sailing, unfortunately, given those three big risks and effectively the knock-on fourth one, Darren, that you quite rightly have identified as a consequence of either or all of 1 to 3. I suspect it will be all of 1 to 3 playing. Rhiannon, look, again, just from my point, absolute agreement and pleased that actually we are looking at this from the perspective of the long-term plan. That is actually the key document from a planning perspective that we've had corporately agreed we should be living with that for 3 years. So I understand the basis on which that's done, and I get this being much more closely aligned, so I get that. And I also reflect the wisdom that if you've got a good long-term plan, you should try and live with it, unless you really have to set an annual plan up and go to consultation. So I appreciate there may be points that go with that. No other comments from people? Do I have a councillor prepared to move the motion that we receive Rhiannon's report? Thank you, Rangi. Thank you, Bex. I'll put the motion then. If there's no discussion on the motion, there isn't. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rhiannon. Appreciate all the papers that you've actually brought. I'm up to item 12, which is the Business Enhancement Program. And this is just a late request from me and Ross. We were planning the agenda with Michael, just to give us a quick update on where things are at, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I'd like to just give an update a wee bit on what we're trying to do around business enhancement with our technology and our services. So I'll go through that, and then I'll just give a quick update on what's going on in our cybersecurity side at the moment. So council staff are currently working on a business enhancement program to bring back to council, hoping to get that to you by the end of the year. It's currently in draft. That is focused on the ability for us to connect digitally both with our staff and with our community. That's focused on service improvement and risk mitigation. So it will take into account the internal audit actions you've seen today, but also ongoing ones, because it is a continuous program of internal audit. But it will be focused on technology change and significant process improvement to the ends that I mentioned before in relation to connecting staff and community. I'll be looking, as I said before, have this to you hopefully by the end of the year. There are still a few things to work through. But I wanted to be clear that this is not saying we're not working on improvements, and it's not saying we're not working on our internal audit actions. We continue to work on those as part of our BAU program, and you've already seen that as part of the internal audit program brought back to you today. The other update I'd like to give you is on cybersecurity. Prior to lockdown, thankfully, we put in a new VPN connection from that perspective, or network. That allowed us to have a bit more security over our network as we went into lockdown. That was pretty much the week before that we went live on that, so there was a bit of risk involved in that, but I'm pleased to say that it was a very successful outcome and created more security for us from that perspective. Other improvements we're looking at as part of that is just our whole password process. It's just good practice for us to continue to review what we're doing in that space, make sure we are protected and protecting anyone that's accessing into there. We're also doing a review of our email filtering and security services. That's probably the highest risk area for channels for cybersecurity attacks to occur. So we're currently doing a review of that, and we're sharing that with our neighbouring councils. So it's being done as a collective across all councils in the southern region. So that's quite a good news story from our side, that we are starting to work quite closely in cybersecurity with the other local councils. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Do folk have any questions for Michael on his verbal update? There are none? Okay. We've got a short resolution here that we received the verbal update from Michael on Business Enhancement Program. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Rangi. I'll put the motion, please. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. It's good to keep those issues in front of us. Thank you very much. Right, we're at that stage where we have moved to the amended agenda, as we've said, which is bringing out of public excluded the independent review of electronic access. For those of you that haven't already, they're in your papers, obviously, under public excluded, but we're going to deal with those now. Andrew's already there. Well done, Andrew. Thank you. I've invited Andrew to address us. He ran the cutter on this with the reviewer. And Andrew, I'd invite you to make some opening comments, please, if that's possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think the starting point in this review is to go back through the history and understand why this review is here and the purpose of it. I think it's important, the Chair reminded you of this earlier on, the role of the Risk and Audit Committee, and it's important that you refresh yourself, I suppose, and understand why this review is here and the basis on which it was asked for. So, at the risk of boring you all, I'll take you back through a little bit of your charter, the history, the terms of reference, and why the report addresses those matters and deals with those in a comprehensive manner. So to begin with, I mean, obviously it starts with the terms of reference. Why is this matter here? And realistically, it's here because within the risk and assurance terms of reference in particular, there is a power that this committee is to monitor existing corporate policies and recommend new corporate policies to prohibit unethical, questionable or illegal activities. And so that's clearly called out as one of the responsibilities of this committee. And when you look at the circumstances that gave rise to this review, that is then reflected in the terms of reference, when the terms of reference talk about, in particular, this committee wishes to understand that the systems and processes set up to implement Council's April resolution are appropriate, understood and were followed with regard to the etc., etc. So you can see the basis for the power for this committee to request the review, the terms of reference reflecting that, and then the review being requested. Now, with respect to the terms of reference, and it's useful because the minutes of that meeting where those terms of reference were discussed were approved again at this meeting. And so early on under agenda item 4, you've got the terms of reference. You can see that there was a robust discussion at that time around what the terms of reference were, what was going to be included, what the purpose of the review was. And so again, you've got the committee understanding its terms of reference, understanding its powers, and requesting a review to be conducted to ask a range of questions that it considered were appropriate for it to be able to fulfill its function. So that's the sort of formal and strict background to the basis on which the review is undertaken and the answers or the questions that the review tries to answer. If you then go through the review, it does that in a very methodical manner. It addresses the legislative obligations that Council had to consider in terms of the Privacy Act and LGOIMA in terms of how it deals with the emails or any other matters that come within its possession. It then deals with the resolutions of the Council as it was requested to from April, deals with the way in which services are provided within Council, and then reaches some conclusions. And I think it's really the second part of the terms of reference which opens up the real findings from the review, and I'll repeat them again just to at the risk of boring you. It's that the systems and processes were understood and followed. So basically the review makes a finding that the system and processes were fine, but raises some issues as to whether or not they're fully understood by everyone who was involved in their application and how they were actually applied in practice. And that is the real finding of this review. The systems and processes are correct and appropriate, but there might be some improvements around clarity in terms of how those systems and processes work in practice. And so you can see that in the end, we've gone through quite a robust process in terms of the committee's powers, why this committee is dealing with it, the questions that were asked to be considered, and the answers that were given. So on that basis, I mean, I can only ask. I dealt with Mr. Buchanan around providing materials. I can answer some questions. Obviously, I can't speak for him in terms of his actual findings. I think, to be fair, they speak for themselves, although they might be a little bit meaty to get through. But if you've got any or require any further clarification, happy to assist.
All right, thank you for that, Andrew. That's very helpful that actually we've got the report that we asked for, and that's within a scope that was well and truly within inside the ambit of this committee to deal with. Thank you for those opening comments, and indeed your high-level comments about actually that Robert is providing a very useful report for us to understand our systems and processes. At this point, I'd like to open it up for questions in some sense of Andrew, but also comments at this stage. I'm open to those. Yes, Nobby.
Two things. The initial one's a bit of a point of order, I guess. The Mayor earlier today tried to introduce a legal opinion that he's got from Ken Patterson to this meeting, and I just need to clarify with the Mayor that the report that he's about to table or attempt to table is open for discussion, because it says clearly at the top private and confidential. Now we're in an open meeting now, so I need to know from the Mayor that he's authorising us to discuss that report if it's introduced to this meeting. I don't want to be caught up on that. So I'd appreciate if you asked him that.
Look, can I just ask one question first, Andrew, if I could of you? The email I received said this was a substantive part of the feedback to Mr. Buchanan. I think I would like confirmation that he actually has seen that. Are you aware of that?
I haven't had an opportunity to check word for word, but I've done a quick scan of the document that was received by Mr. Buchanan, which had a subtly different title to it than the one that's been distributed by Sir Tim. But my scan is that they're very much verbatim. I can address the question a bit more broadly if you want at this stage. I mean, it was received by Mr. Buchanan, and he questioned and we discussed whether or not he should, one, receive it at all, because effectively it was a legal opinion written for a third party, but we clarified with Sir Tim's lawyers that it was meant to be received by him, and that any sort of legal sensibilities, confidentiality were waived in providing it to Mr. Buchanan. Secondly, the major point that caused a discussion between myself and the reviewer was that in essence it was an attempt to change the scope, and to that extent the document was deemed in essence irrelevant for Mr. Buchanan, to the extent that it went to trying to amend the scope that had been set by this committee, and to the extent that it dealt with matters that were within scope, they were taken into account and considered in the formulation of his review. There was then a further response, which I think is alluded to in that correspondence received from Sir Tim, which dealt with matters within the scope of the review again, and some matters without, but again, they were dealt with and come up in the addendum to Mr. Buchanan's report. So, short answer, yes, I can confirm from my quick scanning of the two documents that document was received, subject to the change to the parties that it was addressed to. but the content has been reviewed by Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you. So, in effect, the email we received last night with that opinion has in short, Nobby, been taken into account by Mr. Buchanan as he has completed his review. I don't see any point in
to the extent that it's within scope,
because it's being dealt with by Mr. Buchanan. We have his report, and I'm not inclined to see that it is relevant to our direct discussion today.
Okay, thank you for that. So just moving on a little bit, I've read the report that Andrew refers to as being meaty. You've been kind to him, I think.
How many times did you read it, Nobby?
Twice, and it's hard work. Very hard work. But look, there's a more serious issue here, and I've sat quiet for some time, so now's the opportunity for me to make some statements about what's transpired in this whole process, and comment on the Buchanan report. And so I've tried to analyse what happened in that whole incident of hacking the email, if that's what it's to be called. And so for me, I've looked at the policies before the Buchanan report and subsequently since. And so the question for me is, does the policy allow for monitoring of emails on an ICC site? And clearly it does. And that's not specific to the mayor. It could be specific to a group manager monitoring the emails that have been done by a staff member. So that's not in question. So the answer is yes to that. Would one expect a chief executive to monitor the emails of an elected member without due cause? And clearly my expectation of that would be no. And then the third and most critical question is, do we have due cause in this case to be monitoring the chief executive, monitoring the mayor's emails? And the answer to that is clearly yes. And that's specified initially in the 27th of April meeting that we had, where if you go back to the minutes of that meeting, we had a discussion. It was quite clear the outcome, that the chief executive was empowered to provide me as deputy mayor with the weekly schedule of meetings that the mayor was attending, and secondly, to also monitor some of the emails, because what was happening in that is that I was getting a weekly schedule that said the mayor goes to the following meetings, but before I get the next one, which is a week later, things crop up. So somebody urgently comes in and says we need to have a presence at the thing. And a good example was the MPI meeting around the virus that was in the oysters and the things. Now, I didn't get a heads up on that, and so one of the things that we discussed at that 27th April meeting was for Claire or her staff to keep an eye on incoming emails, and so that I didn't miss out on some of those meetings, because it's important that we have a presence. So that's quite unique to Invercargill. In the normal circumstances, that wouldn't occur, and the mayor would just say to the deputy or somebody else, look, I can't make this meeting, or I'd like you to be there as a support person for me at this meeting. You're more knowledgeable on this matter. But that doesn't happen in Invercargill, so we're working around that. So the issue then becomes, if you have a staff member or the chief executive monitoring emails for the purposes of picking up incoming invites for meetings, and you see something else that's of concern, would we as councillors expect the chief executive or staff member to ignore that email? So putting aside what the email was actually about, if you found that something in there was being done fraudulently, not by the mayor but by anybody, would you say, well, actually that's not the reason I'm looking at these emails, I'll just put that aside and park it up? That staff member, be it a manager or the chief executive, would be hung in court at a later stage if they ignored it. So my view of all this is, it was appropriate for the chief executive to bring forward that email. And I know that's caused a bit of angst with a couple of our colleagues, elected member colleagues. But the bottom line is, we as a chairs group had tried on numerous occasions to encourage the mayor not to, one, make media statements that were inaccurate and downright dishonest. And that's for the record. And we'd had numerous occasions of that, and we tried to encourage him not to do that, and his response is he doesn't care less. And so if we get a signal that says that there's another media release going out, then it's appropriate to raise it with us, because it wasn't just a matter of the mayor having his right to say what he wants to say. There was an important twist in this particular email. And the important twist was that the mayor was actually breaching the Local Government Act, the Code of Conduct, the Employment Relations Act, and the chief executive's personal contract, because he was in that statement making a statement about a staff member, and he said he was humiliated by a staff member. Well, that's inaccurate. He wasn't humiliated by a staff member, and I've got evidence to that, and as his partner has. Staff members didn't throw out his personal effects. Those personal effects were taken from that classroom by myself, the mayor, and the mayor's partner. And the mayor's partner had total control. I sat there for a whole day doing this exercise, and I could see the tension between Tim wanting to retain everything and his partner wanting to have none of it. And so it was right for the chief executive to give us an advance notice, given the history of media statements that had said criticism of staff. Now, I don't care if he calls me Brutus in the paper. That just water off a duck's back. I can live with that. But when he criticises staff, as he did with the IT support issue, where he claimed he hadn't had any, when in fact he had, and he criticises the chief executive in the process, we have employment issues. And they are not just reputational damage to us, which I can live with the mayor's statements, but it puts us at risk of a personal grievance. And it was quite right for the chief executive to raise that in my mind. And if we face the same thing again today, I'd expect her to do it. And in fact, if she didn't, for reasons of the Privacy Act and tiptoeing around that, I would personally hold her accountable. So I just think it needs to be said that we have a very unique situation in Invercargill where we have a mayor, through his partner, who doesn't give us a no surprises policy, which we've asked for and is reflected in the charter, which is good behaviour. And so we are tiptoeing around the issue. We've tried to ignore the statements. We've tried to get legal advice. We've tried to challenge them in meetings, and we get accused of bullying when we do that. I mean, there just seems to be no resolution to this. And so we are unique, and while we have laws around privacy and we have laws around legema, we are not in the normal environment here. We have a very unique situation that we're trying to manage.
Thank you, Nobby. I just would like to just be careful here. We're not indeed, as Mr. Buchanan has been at pains to do in his report, being clear that he was not engaged to review, it's in our terms of reference, the events of the 10th of August. So I'm going to receive those comments, Nobby, in the generalities of actually how the system is working.
Well, I just made them for one reason, Chair, and that while I accept the terms of reference, and you'll acknowledge that the Mayor did not agree to those terms of reference, and Councillor Kett has recently made a statement, which is outrageous again. The public need to know that this behaviour is not acceptable. This is not going away with the Buchanan report. We've already got this report here. I'm already privy to the Mayor wanting to take this further. So this does not die today. This will have a head of its own, another head of steam up. So we just need to, I need to be saying that we need to be ahead of some of this debate as well, because this is going to get messy.
Thank you. I appreciate your advice. Yes, Rangi?
Look, my question is directly at the report, and it is not chapter.
It's almost chapter. Volumes. Or
I'll quote Article 122.
Point number.
Paragraph 122. And it states the Privacy Act, and it says, accepting that the Mayor's email to the reporter is personal information. Now, I just want some clarity on that, because I want to raise 2 points. Now, the email, because it actually refers to the email, so we are talking about the email, because it's personal. Now, by the nature of the language used in the email, and I have that email copy that appeared in the ODT, is in the form of a press release that would be made public. So I'm just wondering how it can be personal if the end use is going to be public. And the second point is that at the chair's meeting in question, the Mayor told us that he did not write the email. Now, if you did not write the email, then I'm just trying to get my head around how is it personal. So these are questions probably best answered through the chair by Andrew.
Through you, Chair, I think the best way to answer that is that, look, it's when writing these reports, it's effectively a legal technique. Mr. Buchanan hasn't formed a view as to whether or not it's personal or not. He has taken, in essence, the I want to use worst, but it's not worst. But let's put the email at its highest standing and say it is private. What would be the consequences of that? And in the end, he doesn't particularly find any consequences. So it's just a writing and exploration technique rather than a conclusion of a matter of law. So it's a hypothetical almost. He could have done the other hypothetical and said if it wasn't personal, what would have occurred? But it's just that because the deeming something to be personal would have the highest consequence, he explores that scenario. So there's no legal conclusion. And that's why, hence the starting with the word accepting. It's just, I haven't made a decision. Let's just accept that because that submission's been made to me.
So would he be aware that it was up to interpretation of that particular chapter or were you?
He just hasn't made a conclusion because he's explored the as I said, I don't want to use worst, but it's hard not to say. I've explored the circumstance that would give that email the highest protection. And what would be the consequences if that were the case? And that's why it's appropriate, because it fits. Whilst we're, as you said, it's talking in the specific. The review is in the general. So let's take the general scenario. He acknowledges the collection of the emails is appropriate, but acknowledges that they could be personal or not personal, but collection would still be valid. The use. What's the worst case if it's a personal email?
My opinion of that then, it is quite misleading when you put it all in context and you work it through. It's just a bit misleading, that's all. That's from my layman's point of view.
Except that you could take it that way, but understanding how these things are written, it's just a hypothetical.
Okay. Thank you.
I think, Bex, you may begin it, but Sir Tim, at the start of the meeting, you indicated you would like to make some statements or raise some questions over the report. I'd like to invite you, if at this stage you would like to make any comments.
Yes, are we in committee or?
No, we're not. We're in public, Sir Tim. As we agreed prior to you came in that we would deal with this matter in public.
Well, there's two. Just waiting.
So Tim, I mean, yeah. Would you like to discuss with me what you want to say? It may be that you don't want to say it in public.
Yeah. I think it's pretty. I'll stop if I think it's getting into dangerous ground.
Might be too late.
We have different interpretations of what actions have been said, and it's sort of starting to degenerate into a he said, a she said situation, which never doesn't seem to resolve things. But I have gone through a large number of deputies, and it all follows the same pattern. They seem to be, that might be a bit critical. I'll see.
I've got broad shoulders, Tim. Get on with it.
The rest of us might not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, come on. Let's have it out on the table.
But Peter Gett was the last soldier, last surviving open public supporter of the mayor, and I thought it was heroic, and went out to congratulate him through the door, saying, you know, good on you for standing up for your rights, and the usual rhetoric. And he, I said, why did you change your view so much? And he said, oh, they've threatened to take my money, that it'll cost so much, that the same thing will happen to me, it's happening to you. And So he withdrew. He's not going to pursue the matter. Now, you'll see that as a great victory, but I don't. I see it as a bit of a tragedy, really, that we can't speak without that overhanging threat. Just a few minor points. Wish to correct that I was not consulted by the executive manager about the role or required skills for my part as for personal assistance. I feel vindicated by the report. Buchanan has identified the email was personal information. He identifies privacy principles should therefore apply. The reviewer makes it clear he cannot reach a conclusion as to the use of the email after its intervention. So it's not so much what was said, but what was it used for. As the findings are inconclusive, I'm requesting a further review with a broader scope to consider the lawfulness of the interceptions. As per my privacy sourced opinion, I believe there needs to be more precise review of the specific event of the interception. Further, I believe the CE's admitted wrongdoing should be thoroughly investigated, and there needs to be repercussions. The scope of the current review sought to sweep the issue under the carpet by focusing on arrangements in place rather than the actions of the CE. And of course, you should have received Ken's two tabled reports. So it's I don't like to sort of spoil the party, because there's a lot of good work been going on here and everyone's recognising that, but at the same time we've got to make a stand for the running of the council along lines of that encourage free speech. You'll never have total free speech because there's so many regulations, and we heard some of them, but we should always aspire, I believe, to encourage people to speak out freely and openly about how they feel, not just for parties, and we should have parties. We used to have lots of parties, but we should also, I think, recognise that there's a lot of continual work to defend those privacy issues. And I probably to the wrong side. My view of local government is that Yes Minister is a documentary rather than a comedy show, and we should always be all right celebrating success, but also defending those rights that have been fought for by previous generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Tim. Nobby, did you have a response to it?
Yeah, I do have actually. Yeah, I'd be opposed to. I'd be opposed to a further review. There's a cost involved with that, and I'm not sure that we actually got a really good outcome for many elected members from the Buchanan report. When I look at the big picture here, contrary to advice that I gave to the Chief Executive at the time, she did publicly apologise for intercepting the email, and not for intercepting it, by presenting it to the Chairs Group. She made a public apology for that. If the Mayor feels that that's not good enough, he has options that don't involve an external review. And his options are that collectively elected members are the employer of the Chief Executive, and he has a right, as I said to Peter Kett yesterday, both of them have a right to raise with us collectively if they think that the Chief Executive has breached the standards that we would normally expect for her performance. That opens up a range of options, if you think about employment law, from doing nothing, through a verbal warning, a written warning, a final warning, a summary dismissal. They're all options in employment law, but a report doesn't activate that. The report that we've got tells us about the issues that we've got, and the Chief Executive, to her credit, has acknowledged that she shouldn't have passed it on. That's not my personal view. I appreciate that she did. But if we want to analyse and identify whether that action was appropriate, given her apology, then the issue, I think, for the Mayor is he's ignoring that apology and is now seeking for her to be dealt with in a more formal manner. And that formal manner is an employment issue. And therefore, as her employer, we have options available to us, which would initially start with the initial step in that would be the Mayor would put up his issue, as would Peter Kett, and the Chief Executive would be asked to respond in writing, and then we deal with it.
I want to reflect that's not the business for this committee.
I understand that, but
Performance Review Committee
the
as
Mayor
well,
has introduced that.
Yes, no, I understand that, and I appreciate your advice, Nobby.
Yep.
Bex, you've been patient. Sorry, I did go in front of you with Nobby, so thank you. Bex, you may have something you want to say.
That's all good. Thanks, Chair. I've been thinking about this, and the review, it appears, has looked at what we've asked for in the terms of reference. And in my recollection, when we go back to the time when we approved those terms of reference and the person to undertake that review, the Mayor actually spoke against the reviewer. He didn't speak against or ask for any changes to the terms of reference. So, I think that it's a bit late to be kind of asking for that now. In light of the question which we have asked, which Andrew pointed out earlier, was did we follow the systems and processes that we had in place? And the answer to that appears to be yes, although not all of us maybe understand what that has meant for us in terms of access to our emails, etc., etc. So in light of that, I'm wondering, just looking at these recommendations, for this report, there's two recommendations, one about the learnings, one about receiving the report. But given the media profile of this and the discussion of it in so many public forums and so forth, I wonder if we actually need to include an additional recommendation around supporting that the CE's action actually in sharing the email with the Chairs Group was an appropriate thing to do. I would say that in regards to the fact that the terms of reference for the Chairs Group talks about keeping councillors informed of things and being a conduit for information. I would also say that in light of the first Thompson report, which we had well and truly had by that time, which talked about helping council to support councillors in building their public confidence, and that's about looking after the council's reputation. And also in light of the media protocols which have been approved, which actually talk about having a no surprises approach. So to me, all of those things make it appropriate that that email was shared with us, and I would like to see us include a resolution in this on this item around acknowledging that the CE's actions in sharing that email were appropriate.
Thank you, Bex. So you are effectively moving an amendment to this motion?
Yes. Or an amendment or an additional item?
An addition. Sorry. I've only got two at the moment, so you're making a third in
Yes,
effect.
yes.
I don't jest. I think probably this is one where I'd like to treat this formally as an addition or an amendment to the motion, and I'd like to seek a seconder. So if we just be clear, you're wanting to move what?
There's no motion on the table yet, Chair, so.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh, good point. Good point. Okay. We'll come back to that. Okay.
So you could add it.
No, no, well, well, I suppose you could add it. Yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough. Can we just verbalise what you're trying to add to the motion that's yet to be moved?
A recommendation that states that the CE's action in sharing the email to the chairs group was an appropriate action for her to take as per the findings of the report. Or something to that effect.
That Claire is quite right. We just need to get ourselves in the right place. This would be a recommendation to council that they approve these processes.
Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
sweet. So that would be an addition. We've got that there. Yes. Hold on. We need to get. Can we get the? Are we able to get that up on the board, please? I think it's probably appropriate. Sorry, and Darren, thank you for pulling me up on process that I do actually get a mover and a seconder for this motion, so we can debate it together.
Second.
So you're second,
Certainly.
Rex is moving, and Nobby is seconding. Thank you for that, and thank you, Darren, as I said, for correcting me. Now, is there any discussion on the motion as it stands?
In sharing the email with the chairs.
Yes, Rangi.
I don't have discussion. I've still got discussion pending on what we were talking about before, but not regarding this particular edition.
Was appropriate.
I think it's worthwhile just getting this typed up. Thank you. I know it's under pressure, but I think it's wise if we have it written if we're going to consider the motion further. Are there any other comments folk would like to raise?
Is it? We're talking about the main item.
We've moved them all together, haven't we?
Yep.
Okay. Right. Look.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this point, it might be good if you clarify. I'm not usually a voting member of this committee. On this particular issue, are we going by the original extraordinary invitation that all councillors be present at risk and assurance for this purpose?
It is a recommendation to council, Chair, so council will ultimately vote on it anyway.
Yes, I think that's the way I would probably need to rule it, Leslie, that actually the chances for full voting is when it comes to council.
Okay.
As such, but I am very happy for your input at this meeting if you would like to say anything.
Yes, I'm going to restrain myself from dealing with the entire report in front of us, but just refer to paragraphs 127 to 130, the concluding comments, and just point out that the additional recommendation that's gone up is a useful decision to recommend to council in relation to paragraph 129. I think that clarifies. The reviewer has gone as far in paragraph 129 as his invitation terms of reference allowed him. I think it's very appropriate that council adds recommendation 3 there, because if it can be seen as an extension of 129 and an actual decision by council, that it is an appropriate addition to make, and I agree it's appropriate to put that in light of the entire report, which I will restrain myself from going through. I think adding recommendation 3 is very appropriate.
Thank you, Leslie. Do appreciate your input, and indeed, as a voluntary member here for your attendance, it's always appreciated. Are there any other points that folk would like to make? Yes, Rangi.
Look, it regards a comment His Worship made regarding the inhibition of free speech and so-called regulations hindering that. Now, what I want to raise is that obviously Section 14.2 or Section 14 of the Schedule 7, in reference to councillors' conduct and elected members' conduct, it has us at the start of the triennium making a pledge that we will abide by the acts imposed on us, and that includes the Local Government Act. Now, and this is probably a question for Andrew, can a member choose, if they feel that they're inhibited by these acts, denounce their pledge? And is that a possibility? I just wondered if is that something that someone can go, look, I didn't know the full implications of making this pledge because it's restricting me.
I'm wondering where we're going here, Rangi.
Well, look, we're going down.
It's a very interesting point, and I might engage on it, but I'm not certain it's one that's quite relevant to the topic we've got in hand, which is the motion we have in front, mate.
It was just something raised, and I thought, well, you know, sometimes you can, yeah. Okay, now if you wish me to cease and desist, I will.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Right, Nobby.
Just one final comment, which is a similar sort of thing, but not the same. In the report in section 108, which is on page 126 of the board books, Buchanan talks quite clearly about the rights of people to speak on their own behalf, which is what the Mayor is alluding to. And you know my position on free speech. I've been in trouble many times for council and a couple of times since then by being out of line. But it does clearly state there that you cannot criticise staff publicly. That's a no-no. And I've done that once, and I've worn the wrath of doing that. And secondly, the statements that you make on your own behalf must also be accurate. And so while the Mayor says we're shackling free speech, that's not the case. He's welcome to say what he likes, but it must be accurate, and it must not criticise staff. Criticise me, criticise Rangi, that's fine. But the staff is no-go zone.
Thanks, Nobby. Alex,
Well, I'd just like to have the
sorry, Sir Tim.
say.
Sorry, Sir Tim. I've got Alex. I think you point to make, and then Sir Tim.
I just wanted to ask a question. In that Sir Tim has referenced his legal opinion from Ken Patterson. Does that become publicly discoverable and form part of the report?
It's not part of Mr. Buchanan's report. What we have established is that he was, as far as we know, given Andrews indicated there was a change in the title, it is the same opinion that Mr. Buchanan has seen, and he has taken into account as he has prepared his full response.
Yeah, so he was fully aware of the other opinion at the time. It's just quite concerning because obviously, even though it was sent at 11:38 last night, for of course this meeting at 8:30 start this morning, and with a request for us to read it somehow in our sleep, was fundamentally flawed in several ways. There's so many inaccuracies in what he has been provided as fact. So I was just...
We have the benefit of Mr. Buchanan's consideration of that and response in the report that we are considering, and obviously at the stage we've got a series of motions. So Tim, you wanted to make a point.
Just that it's a moving in relation to what Nobby said. It's a moving target when you try and pin down what is free speech. It's changing all the time, and just one example was I was arrested in the 60s for distributing jelly beans at a council meeting, and it was the led by the man who saved Britain. He moved on and became a councillor, and the other reason I'm always seem to be in fighting and defending free speech, and that was
I wonder, Sir Tim, if I could just interrupt here. It's a bit like my advice to Rangi. I think some of the finer points of free speech, along with also the oath under the Act, are ones that we probably could debate with some interest, but I'm not certain that it's directly relevant to where we're at the moment. So I wonder if we could move on, please. Are there any other points that people would like to raise? Yes, Ross.
I think it's the substantive debate around this will be at council. Just remind everyone that here we are a risk and assurance committee, and we are looking at the risks and mitigating those, and and ensuring that the correct processes are in place to be followed. So that's our first and foremost role. I support Bex and the statements you made around the recommendations from the Thompson report, the media protocols, and councillors all need to learn that the way they conduct themselves in integrity should be paramount. So, think before speaking would be very useful rather than making ill-informed comments outside.
Thank you, Ross. Good morning. Is there any further debate?
Well, it was Sir Keith Park that I accepted the jelly beans, and during the war, my father was in the Fleet Air Arm and got killed in training, for the Korean War. And so it's a treasured principle that may just seem there's a time for a party, but it's time for some real discussion on what's fair and what isn't.
Thank you, Sir Tim. And I think that's tied back up with indeed Ross's good advice, that actually the second recommendation is really important, which is that Robert has said there are learnings inside this report, and he is asking us to reflect on those, and that indeed the working group, working groups, I'm not quite sure which one it is, but we'll pick this up for consideration because we need to deal with that. So we are saying from a systems and processes point, dare I say it, from the wider points that you're saying and that are alluded to inside this independent report, that they do need to be picked up and thought through as part of the working group. So I think that's a good place to leave it. If there's no more discussion, we have Bex moving all three motions or resolutions, and Nobby, I think I'm correct in saying you have seconded these.
Sure.
With that then, I would like to put these motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried.
I'll abstain.
Did you abstain?
Abstain.
You're abstaining. Okay, sorry. If we could amend that, please, to recognise Sir Tim's abstention from the vote, please. That would be useful. Still passed by majority. Okay, thank you for that and for dealing with that. We are still in public session and we indeed still have two matters to deal with. The first is urgent business. I haven't been informed of any urgent business. And the last item, which is the old item 14, is to move into public excluded. And we have the items to be considered in public excluded, obviously with the late elimination of what was G, which was the independent review, which we have just considered in public. So I will move from the chair that for the reasons that are stated in the table, we move into public excluded. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Alan. I'll put the motion. All those, oh, sorry, Michael?
Can I just ask that Phil Fisher and Annabelle Duncan are included in the exceptions for the tax update, please?
Yes, please. That's good. We've got external people from PwC to join us for the tax governance policy item, and so the motion should include theirs, and also, as I recognise, I think we've moved that Jeff and Lindsay by natural role are also here as well. So I'll put that motion, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against? It's carried. Can I recommend that we've done well? Claire, if it's okay. Oh, Nobby?
Can I just signal that for item 8, the Mayor will have to be absent?
Yes. Yes,
Thank you.
Appreciate that, and that's why we will, as is our practice, take that as the last item on the agenda.
I just ask, Chair, are we still on live stream? For the general
Yes,
public?
we are. Andrew will finish. Just a moment. You won't start until we tell.
No. I'll certainly make certain. Actually, what I'd like to recommend is we've gone well.